I dressed carefully that morning, choosing the blouse I saved for special occasions. I smoothed the fabric with my hands, as if it could quiet the unease already settling inside me. We were on our way to a family reunion, one I had been looking forward to for weeks. Familiar faces, old stories, voices I still carried in my memory. I told myself it would be a good day, but somewhere along the road my body betrayed that hope. Without warning, fear washed over me, sharp, heavy. It stole the breath from my chest. My hands went cold, my vision blurred. It wasn't panic, not the kind people talk about. It felt deeper than that, like something inside me had recognized danger before my mind could explain it. I leaned toward my husband, my voice barely held together. "Turn the car around," I whispered. He looked at me, confused, but calm. He asked why. I couldn't explain. I didn't have reasons or logic. All I could say was, "Please, just trust me." The road stretched ahead of us, long and quiet, under a sky heavy with gray clouds. Trees passed by like silent witnesses. With every mile forward, the pressure in my chest grew heavier, and memories from the night before began to surface. My son's phone call, the way his voice sounded rehearsed, controlled, how he insisted I arrive at the reunion hall at an exact time, not early, not late, as if everything depended on that one detail. I had laughed it off then. Mothers do that. We protect our children, even from our own doubts. But now, sitting in that moving car, the pieces began to collide. I have lived a long life, long enough to know joy never comes without sorrow woven into it. I raised my family with tired hands, worked extra hours, carried worries quietly, because I believed that was the price of love. Family meant everything to me, especially our reunions. They were meant to remind us who we were to one another, that no matter how far life pulled us apart, we still belonged together. But over time, something had shifted. My son spoke differently now, less warmth, more urgency. He talked about arrangements, documents, things that felt colder than family should feel. I told myself it was stress, life being heavy, but as the road hummed beneath us and my heart beat louder than the engine, I finally understood something I had been avoiding. This reunion wasn't waiting for me with open arms. Something else was waiting, and every instinct I had earned over a lifetime was begging me to listen before I reached the place where turning back might no longer be possible. My husband finally slowed the car. He didn't argue anymore. He could hear it in my breathing, see it in the way my hands trembled in my lap. When we pulled over to the side of the road, the silence inside the car felt heavier than the traffic rushing past us. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. I stared straight ahead, trying to find words that made sense. All I had were feelings, fear without proof, a warning without facts. And yet, the longer we sat there, the clearer everything became. It wasn't just the phone call. It was everything that had led up to it. In the months before the reunion, my son had grown distant. Not slowly, intentionally. He stopped asking how I was feeling. He didn't ask about my health, even after my last hospital visit. Instead, he asked about paperwork, about whether my will was updated, about where certain documents were kept. At the time, I told myself he was being practical, responsible, that he was worried about me in his own awkward way. Mothers are experts at turning warning signs into excuses. But sitting there on the side of that road, those questions changed shape. I remembered how he insisted I travel, even though I was tired. How he said he would handle everything once I arrived. How he promised I wouldn't need to worry about arrangements anymore. That word, anymore, it echoed in my mind. I turned to my husband and said the thing I had been afraid to admit. I think they want something from me. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. I told him about the pressure, the way my son reminded me again and again that I was getting older, that I shouldn't be making big decisions alone, that it might be easier if things were already settled, just in case something happened. Nothing illegal, nothing obvious, just enough to make fear sound like concern. A deep sadness settled in my chest, not just fear, but grief, the kind that comes when you realize your child may no longer see you as a person, but as a problem to solve. My husband reached over and took my hand. "He don't have to go," he said. The relief that washed over me was immediate, and that scared me. Because if this reunion were truly about love, turning back would have felt like loss. Instead, it felt like survival. As he turned the car around and the road stretched out behind us, my heart began to slow. But one question wouldn't leave me. If turning back felt this right, what exactly had been waiting for me if I hadn't listened?
We had been home less than an hour when my phone rang. I knew who it was before I looked. Some instincts don't need confirmation. They recognize patterns. My son's name glowed on the screen. For a moment, I let it ring. The sound echoed through the kitchen like a warning. Then I answered. "Where are you?" he asked. No greeting, no concern, just urgency. "We turned back," I said quietly. There was a pause. Not shock, not worry, calculation. "Why would you do that?" he asked. "Everyone's already here. We're waiting." That word, waiting, it sat between us, heavy, sharp. I told him I wasn't feeling well, that the drive had been too much. It was reasonable. It had always been enough before, but not this time. "You should have called," he snapped. "This makes things complicated." Complicated, not disappointing, not worrying, complicated. That one word confirmed everything my heart had been whispering. I asked him what exactly had become complicated. The line went quiet. Then he said, "We had things arranged." I closed my eyes. Arranged how? Arranged for whom? I didn't ask. I told him we would talk later, and I ended the call before he could pull me back into confusion, before I could become the mother who explains, who apologizes for protecting herself. My husband stood nearby. He had heard enough. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Memories surfaced, conversations I half heard at past gatherings, jokes about my age wrapped in laughter, comments about decisions being made soon, documents I was encouraged to sign quickly, offers to simplify things that now felt anything but kind. The next morning, I did something different. I asked questions. I called a friend who had attended the reunion. I asked what happened after we didn't arrive. Her hesitation answered before she spoke. She told me my son had been upset, that there were whispers about my health, about contingency plans, about decisions that would need to be made soon, as if time no longer belonged to me. When I hung up, my hands were steady, but my heart ached, because the truth was finally clear. That reunion wasn't about family. It was about convenience. And as I sat there in the quiet of my own home, I realized something that changed everything. Not every invitation is an act of love. Some are traps dressed up as tradition.
After that call, something inside me finally went quiet. Not in defeat, but in understanding. The days that followed were calm in a way I wasn't used to. My son didn't call again. No messages, no concern. That silence spoke louder than any argument ever could. It told me what his interest in me had always been tied to: access, not affection. I began sorting through my papers at home, something I had put off for years, not because I was careless, but because I trusted too easily. I found notes written in my son's handwriting, lists of appointments he insisted on scheduling, reminders about important conversations we needed to have soon. At the time, they felt helpful. Now they felt rehearsed. With my husband beside me, I contacted a legal advisor, not to accuse, not to threaten, but to protect. I asked simple questions. What choices were mine alone? What could not be taken without my consent? What signs I should never ignore again? Each answer felt like solid ground returning beneath my feet. I didn't announce these changes to anyone. I didn't need to. I updated documents quietly. I changed who had access to what. Power doesn't always need to be reclaimed loudly. Sometimes it's enough to take it back silently. A week later, my son finally called. His voice sounded different, softer, careful. He asked how I was feeling, said everyone had been worried. He suggested things may have been misunderstood, that reunions can be overwhelming, that no one meant any harm. I listened without interrupting. Then I told him I wouldn't be attending family gatherings for a while, that I needed space, that I would be making decisions at my own pace now. The line went quiet. "You're overthinking this," he said. There it was, the familiar attempt to pull me back into doubt. "I'm thinking clearly," I replied. "That's the difference." He didn't argue. He didn't apologize either. But I didn't need either from him anymore. What surprised me most was not the fear I felt, but the relief, the kind that comes when you finally set down a weight you didn't realize you were carrying. And as I sat there after the call ended, I understood something that filled me with calm. Sometimes distance isn't abandonment. It's the first real act of self-respect.
Life didn't suddenly become easy after that. Some mornings, I still woke up with a familiar ache, the kind that comes from loving someone who no longer knows how to love you back without conditions. But the fear that once guided my choices, had loosened its grip. In its place, there was something steadier. Trust. Trust in myself. I stopped waiting for invitations that came with expectations. I spent more time in the garden, letting the rhythm of tending something living quiet my thoughts. I chose how my days unfolded instead of bracing for how others might interrupt them. The silence from my son continued. At first, it hurt. Then, it clarified. Relationships reveal their truth not only through words, but through absence. When someone reaches for you only when they need something, you learn the value of your own company. I found strength in small acts, declining calls that felt intrusive, asking questions before agreeing, taking my time. For the first time in years, time felt like it belonged to me again. Occasionally, family members mentioned the reunion, how it had gone on without us, how people had asked questions. I listened politely and said little. I didn't owe anyone an explanation for choosing my safety over tradition. One afternoon, sitting beside my husband, watching the light move across the room, I realized something important. Nothing terrible had happened because I turned the car around. No disaster, no collapse. The only thing that changed was that a plan no longer worked the way someone intended, and that told me everything. I no longer questioned the feeling that rose in me on that road. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't fear. It was awareness, earned over a lifetime of listening, loving, and surviving. If I had one regret, it was only this, that I hadn't learned sooner to trust that inner voice. But even regret softens with time, because I listened when it mattered most. I didn't go where I was told to go. I went where I was safe. And sometimes that single choice changes the ending of your entire story.